Hi guys, my name is Daniela and I make sewing and DIY videos. Today I'm going to show you how to sew buttons and buttonholes with your sewing machine. I used to sew buttons by hand up until recently because I was kind of scared of the button foot and that it might break a needle if I use it inappropriately. But once I've tried it, I actually prefer it. And if sewing buttons by hand is a possibility, sewing the buttonholes is not, at least for me, because I like to do all of my sewing on the machine and because hand-sewn buttonholes require a lot of time and skill. So I recommend that you sew both the buttons and the buttonholes on the machine.
Take into consideration that the place where the buttons and buttonholes are is usually under a lot of pressure. That's why we need to strengthen the fabric in that area. I've used this fusible interfacing to reinforce the placket. I would add it to the wrong side on half the fold of the placket. That's because I want it reinforced but not too much so that it changes the actual feel and look of the fabric on the face side. The interfacing that I'm using is fusible. It has little dots of glue on one side and it's plain on the other side. If you want to learn more about interfacing, read more on my blog. I'll drop a link below. Here is the dress that needs buttons on the front. It is self-drafted and that's why I need to figure out the place of the buttons myself. If you want to see how I drafted and sewn the color for this dress, check out my previous video. I made this dress with hidden buttons, so I'm going to put the buttonholes on the inner placket. Usually for women, the buttons are put on the left and for men on the right. It depends on the project, but for buttons this size, we usually need between 2.5 and 3 inches distance between them. That would be approximately 7.5 centimeters. If you are working on a pattern, the position of the buttons and buttonholes should be marked. I want the buttons in a straight line, so I draw a vertical line at 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter from the edge of the placket in. On this line, I'm going to mark the place of each button and then do the same on the other side for the buttonholes. I am really careful to mark at the same level because even a small difference in the position of the button and the buttonhole can result in odd shapes later when the garment is buttoned up. Now that I have the right places for the buttons and the buttonholes, I'm going to sew them. I'm using these 2 feet. The small one is for the buttons and the big one is for the buttonholes. These feet, at least in my experience, usually come as accessories with the machine. If you don't own them, you can get them separately. They are included in this 42 feet box that I ordered on Amazon. First, I'm going to sew a couple of buttonholes and buttons on these scraps and with a contrasting thread so that it is easier to see. And then I'm going to finish the dress with the matching thread. The buttonhole foot usually looks like this. It has marks on one side and can be adjusted according to the size of the buttons. I'm going to start with the buttonholes. I always do because if I need to move the button's position a bit to fit, I can do that according to the finished buttonholes. Snap it on the machine and then adjust it according to the mark you made. Put the mark exactly in the middle of the hole and adjust the length to match the mark. Adjust the setting of the machine. A buttonhole has 4 sides and I'm going to switch the stitch type from 1 to 4 as I go. I'm also setting the stitch length to an appropriate one. For my machine, it would be anywhere between 0 and 1, where 0 would be a really dense stitch. I'm sewing the first position of the buttonhole, which is the left vertical side. I'm going to go all the way down to the end of the mark. Then I'm going to switch to the second position, which is for the horizontal stitching. Always adjust the position with the needle up so you don't break it. I'm going to make a couple of stitches here, lift the needle and switch to position 3. I'm sewing all the way up to the beginning, lift the needle and switch to position 4 to finish the buttonhole. To finish the buttonholes, we need to cut through the fabric. To make sure I'm not going to cut through the thread and damage the buttonhole, I'm going to put 2 pins, one at each end. The pins are going to serve as stoppers for the seam ripper. I'm going to cut in both directions until I reach the pins. And the buttonhole is done. Here is how to sew a button. I'm going to replace the foot. Then adjust the settings of the machine. I'm going to set the stitch length at 0 because the stitch should be completely horizontal and go through the holes of the button. Then I'm going to set it to a narrow zigzag seam, which on my machine is between 4 and 5. Then I put the button under the foot. I adjust it properly to match the mark on the fabric and to fit the holes in the opening of the foot. The needle fits better in the holes when they are closer to the foot. I'm going to try and see where the needle goes while I move it by hand. If it doesn't fit, I adjust. If it goes straight in the holes, I sew as I usually would. And here are the finished button and buttonhole. I'm going to follow the same steps to finish the closing of the dress. The first buttonhole I'm making is on the stand and I'm sewing this one horizontally. The other 3 on the placket I am going to sew vertically. And then I'm sewing the buttons on the other side. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a like, subscribe to my channel and also ring the bell to get updates when I post a new video. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Sewing for a Living so we can stay in touch. Thank you so much for watching and until next time. Bye!